All right, so who here has heard of Rodgers and Hammerstein? Just show of hands. Okay. Now, who here has heard of this guy, Bono? Show of hands. Okay. As expected, many more. Now, who here could tell me something they might have in common? Anyone? All right. That's all right, because that's what I'm here to tell you about. The commonality that they have between the two of them is that both have been pioneers in the world of musical theater. Musical theater is really neat in that it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. I follow musical theater news on a very regular basis, so I see how it's constantly changing. My hope is that you'll come away with a better understanding of the shows that have changed musical theater, and most importantly, how those shows have changed musical theater. So in order to know where we are now, you have to know where you came from. So we're going back to the 1940s and 1950s, where we had the golden age of musical theater. As Michael Cantor says in his book, Broadway, the American Musical, he says of this age, it provided audiences with an impressive series of well-crafted, beautifully scored shows with strong narratives and memorable characters. Now, is there anything better you can ask for in a show? All those things are the reasons why we have so many shows from this time period that have become classics and are still shown today. Now, the founders, really, you could say, of this era that really cemented the process and set the mold were Rodgers and Hammerstein with their first musical, Oklahoma. And now, if this works, hopefully we'll hear a little bit from opening notes from the show. Okay, well, I guess we won't. But that's okay. What I wanted you to hear, though, was that it has a very orchestral feel to it. You feel the strings, you feel the trumpets. You can hear that it could be very well something that a symphony orchestra could play. Now, also with the Golden Age, Rodgers and Hammerstein weren't the only ones who developed lots of classic, memorable musicals. Many other talented composers followed suit, and here they are. Now, moving on, just as people were getting used to that mold of the Golden Age musical, we have some kids that came along who said, well, wait, our music, our rock music is not part of musical theater. And those kids came up with the first rock musical called Hair. And they bridged the divide between what was popular in pop culture music, which was rock at the time, and brought into musical theater. It broke a lot of social norms, not only with the field of music, but as well it broke a lot of social norms with the first nude scene in Broadway history. So that was always a little controversy there. As well, these are some titles you might recognize. That rock feel to the music really continued throughout the 70s and 80s with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and two composers named Bobbio and Schoenberg. These are some of their works. Phantom of the Opera, I'm sure, is familiar with Jesus Christ Superstar. Again, I want you to be able to hear some the opening notes from a song from Jesus Christ Superstar. You can really hear there's a guitar riff in it, and the guitar and the drums that you hear in that really help to set the orchestrations. And these are called mega musicals because those scores were very operatic in scope. They were almost completely sung through. As well, they had amazing and fantastically tall sets that were very expensive for the time. And so that's why they're called mega musicals. And as well, like I said, they continued the feel of the pop music with their orchestrations featuring drums and guitars and those sorts of things. Okay, now moving on, let's talk about our generation of musical theater. Our generation of musical theater really became defined and started around the time of Rent, when that came out in 1996. Although we were young, Rent was sort of like the Hair of our generation. It was a rock musical, had a couple different other genre music types within it. But what was different from Hair, according to Thomas Hishak, who wrote the Oxford Companion to American Musical Theater, he says that it had a very youthful portrayal. Like Hair actually was very controversial in that it talked about the Vietnam War, some controversial issues, and Rent does talk about homosexuality and AIDS, some hot topic issues, but they presented it in a very youthful way, as Thomas Hishak said, and it was a very honest portrayal. It wasn't like they were trying to shove any opinions down anyone's throat, and in that way, it was very well regarded and well accepted. Now let's talk about another aspect of musicals that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years that have come out in our lifetime. They've taken a lot from popular culture. One example of that are shows that have been based entirely around songs from popular music groups. The first one to do that was Mamma Mia with the songs of ABBA. They just took a plot and completely formed it around their own songs. Another thing that's been popular is to take popular movies. And Disney has become very popular in doing this because of all of their Broadway shows they've produced. However, one of their most successful is The Lion King, and that is because, according to its review in the New York Times, it didn't use a literal translation. As you can see, it looks much different than the cartoon. And again, here's some examples just in the last 2 years, and Bono, by the way, was the composer for Spider-Man, just to tie that back in, of how pop culture has been taken and infused into musical theater, as well. That includes some music genres such as hip-hop. The neat thing about musical theater is that it has really come to define America, and that America, and it's become America's art form, very appropriately so, because was America a melting pot of diverse cultures, and what has musical theater become? A melting pot of different types of music, different kinds of opinions, different kinds of storytelling. So in that way, it is very deserving of the title of America's art form.